say a person has involved in a certain part of the arts and finds a certain flow involved in that, has reached that state of flow, but then they experience some personal events in their lives that changes that makes it hard for them to find that flow again in that what they had done before. Is it wise to try and force getting back into that flow, or maybe find a new direction in a new interest that you can find that flow in?
Yeah, well, that's quite a question. I really don't have any direct advice, because I find that people seem to recover from these blocks that are caused by kind of life events in different ways. I mean, some people persevere, other people try to. I think the most effective ways, though, that I can, in my experience, from the most effective one is to try to do something else that for a while that gets your mind off both your whatever tragedy or trauma caused your block, and also takes your mind away from trying to push through that block. But something which is appealing. I mean, the typical prescription for a case like that in the 19th century was to travel. You go see new places, try to experience new life forms, and I still think that's not a bad way. If you really had a vocation, a calling for whatever you were doing before, I think sooner or later that will come back. After sometimes a year, takes maybe two, but eventually you can't resist not going back to what gave you joy before. But people are different. Oh, yeah.
I realize that Simon and Priest have done some work with experiential education and outdoor interrelationships with flow. However, I guess my question was directly related to the fact, as an outdoor, or I guess as a leader of any type, when you're especially doing high-risk activities, at that point, I see a possible inherent danger with, as a group leader, interjecting yourself into that state of flow, although you would want to maximize your group into some type of an autotelic experience. Could you, I guess, expound on that, or do you agree or disagree? I don't know.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. You are saying that as a leader you want to get your group in flow, but you yourself don't want to get too involved in and enjoy, experience it, because you have responsibility for the welfare of the group. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting paradox there. I think it's something that I certainly wouldn't want to recommend you to forget the safety of people who depend on you, so that you have and you enjoy your thing yourself. I think that's I guess probably the best recipe then is that the leader of such group should be someone who enjoys protecting the group from harm, right? And that makes you feel good about what you're doing. Yeah.
Hello. You've been talking about the psychology of optimal experience. I'm sort of curious about the psychology of frustration, and thinking specifically about your arousal area where your skills are not quite high enough perhaps to meet your challenges, and wondering is a long period of sort of not quite getting there necessary to get to flow? I'm curious, when you talked about people who had a lot of flow, do they spend a lot of time in deadlock as well? Is there a way to sort of move beyond the deadlock into flow?
Yeah, this kind of blocking of one's flow experience is usually usually temporary, unless something really bad happened to you that really threw you off your pace. But usually you can recover from it quite quickly. And good artists, good writers, good scientists usually find ways of getting into flow when they are frustrated or when they are blocked. And there are innumerable stories about what people do when they hit a block, as temporary block. I mean, one of my favorites, for instance, is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the French philosopher, who had trouble focusing on his writings in the morning because he had too many things. Probably he wasn't a lucid dreamer. He had dreams in his head. He was whatever. But he couldn't do it. So what he used to do, he lived in the Provence in the south of France. He used to get up in the morning around 8 and go sit in the garden outside in the full sun until about 9:30. By then his head was completely, he would take off his wig, so he had, his head would be cooked by the sun. And by the time 9 o'clock, 9:30 arrived, he would go inside and he would be so free of any thoughts or any worries because his head had been kind of like in a microwave oven for a few minutes. So he could start writing, and he wrote without stopping then. That's one technique. Other people have to drink a quart of bourbon or whatever and to get in that state. I mean, there are many ways of doing it, and some are more effective than others. But the thing is, if you want to avoid those blocks, you have to develop a personal strategy. There is no one silver bullet. But for instance, these 80 poets and writers that Susan Perry studied, they each one of them could tell you exactly what they were doing, and they were all different. I mean, some people needed to caress their cat for 15 minutes, stroke their Persian cat before they could focus on writings. Others needed 2 cups of coffee. Others needed go out, take a walk in the garden, whatever. So you have to discover the way to get away from the ordinary reality to this reality you're trying to create. That step is difficult to take, and if you can do that by helping yourself with some strategy, some habit that you cultivate, then it's much easier.
There are some of us who are interested in teaching, so we're looking at it from that point of view of helping others probably identify or get involved with the appropriate field or approach. Could you say something about how you think about the teacher being of help in promoting flow?
Yeah, I think I mentioned briefly that there is some research, especially at State University of San Diego and elsewhere, that shows that the flow of teachers is contagious. That is, the best teaching happens when the teacher enjoys either the subject matter or the ability to communicate to students. Those are the 2 ways in which teaching is effective. That is, often when you ask students what made difference in their school experience, they say teacher X, let's say, and you ask, well, what did teacher X do? And say, oh, well, nothing, he was just such a crazy person. You say, what do you mean crazy person? And you say, well, he would stand there and talk about mathematics as if it was something beautiful, something something that mattered. So I kind of sit up and say, gee, maybe there is something there that I haven't noticed. And eventually I say, oh, yeah, maybe it's good. So there is that enthusiasm, that concern for the subject matter, that if it's genuine and it's expressed genuinely, that, produces involvement, engagement on the part of students. And the other way that students get hooked on learning is by seeing their teachers as somebody who cares for them as individuals and cares and is pushing or pulling them in that direction as people, and that is also very effective. And very often, for instance, these Nobel Prize winners whom I studied in '91, very creative people, almost to a person, to a man or woman, said they really learned very little in school, that classes didn't make much difference to them, but individual teachers did. And they did it by essentially extracurricular means. For instance, Linus Pauling, who had 2 Nobel Prizes by the end of his life, remembers 8th grade teacher who asked him to set up the chemistry experiments for the high school because he thought highly of him. Until then, he was really not that keen on doing that stuff. But as he felt he was singled out because he had something, he didn't know what he had, but the teacher saw something in him, and that got him involved, engaged, and almost all the people who achieved great prominence in art or sciences has stories like that. Not that somehow they got the knowledge from the teacher kind of in an abstract way. It was either because of the example of enthusiasm for something or the care that they felt and the belief that from the teacher in them as individuals. That's just off the cuff.
I think that's a great way to end the afternoon on that note. Would you give a round of applause to Professor? Any more questions? Thank you.